And then when that hits 7, do I? My mental health.
No.
Mobs, good, how are you? Good.
This conference will now be recorded.
CDBG, we have to sign.
Highly coveted.
Signing proof that for attendance, CDBG grant.
It's considered a public hearing.
Let's go ahead, call the meeting to order. And Michelle, can you take roll call?
Mayor Horn,
Here.
Alderman Kittle,
Here.
Alderman Weinmeier,
Here.
Alderman Montello,
Here.
Alderman Volkert,
Here.
Alderman Kraft,
Here.
and I do not have Alderman Vries attending yet. Temporary pause, sorry about that.
This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, my apologies. Should have Pete Vries.
Good. Yeah, okay, so we're good to go? All right. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible.
Adoption of the agenda.
I'd move to adopt the agenda.
Second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Item 5 is public comments. All right. You want to speak in the microphone? All right. Yeah, go for it.
I would just like to say thank you to the voters of District 5 for re-electing me one more time. That's the 9th election I've had with District 5, and I'd like to thank them for all the other elections too. I'd like to say thank you, District 5 voters, for putting your trust and confidence in me. I appreciate that very much. You don't know how that makes me feel. But I know, just from the last 9 elections, that I do have a pretty good bunch of neighbors out there, so thank you very much. One other thing I'd like to comment on, too, is the city staff. Thank you, city staff, for everything that you do for us here. Every day you work, and you're so organized, a good bunch of people and a good bunch of employees. And I mean that to everybody, the city staff, all here, and the ones that aren't here too. But I'd like to say a special thank you to our clerk's office, in the Richmond City Clerk's Office. And that means the clerk, Michelle, and deputy clerk, Christy. You did a terrific job over this election. And I know it took a lot of work, not just election day, but it took a lot of preparation just to come up to election. And with all the absentee ballots, and I don't want any controversies or issues here in the city when it comes to election. And I know that when you two are in charge, there won't be any controversies or issues because I know you've done it right. So I just want to say that, and thank you very much. And that's it.
So I just want to add, how many terms have you served already? 9? Or is this the 10th term?
My first term, I served down in District 2.
Okay,
I've
so,
only had 9 elections
okay,
with District 5.
all right, so 10, this is 11, so we're going to be at 22 years in 2
No,
years.
no, this is 10. After this term, it will be.
Okay, well, I'm not very good at math, so, but I just want to say that I really want the record to show that Alderman Volkert actually can talk, and we might have gotten about,
Once in a while.
the council may have gotten double your output for the first 20 years.
Double my output.
Or 18, yeah, double the output, verbally, anyhow. I want to echo the same things that Ron said, not just to the people that voted in his district, but the folks that voted in mine as well. I want to give all the accolades to city staff, except it sounds hollow now, because you already said it. So there's a reason you never want to speak second.
That's why I wanted to talk first.
Ron said he wanted to go first, so there you go, folks. But just for the record, there it is.
Very good.
In any conversation with Mike, Ron, you should talk first.
Otherwise, I won't be able to talk at all.
Harsh.
He owed you that one, Mike. He owed
Okay.
you that one.
Okay.
Any other public comments? All right, hearing none. Item 6 is a consent agenda.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 7 is old business. 7.1 is Resolution 042201, the Tax Incremental District Termination Resolution for TID number 5.
And council, in your packet is the brief memo and then also the resolution for tonight that is in front of you for consideration. As you will recall, during the March 28th work session meeting, we discussed all 7 of the tax increment districts within the city of New Richmond, but specifically highlighted 3 of those that we discussed, kind of the opportunity to close those early, and then also we discussed an affordable housing extension of the tax increment district, which is a law that was put in place about 10 years ago. The first agenda item tonight is in regards to the closure of tax increment district 5. It's the oldest tax increment district of the ones that are currently open. The purpose of tax increment district was to develop the business and technical park down on the south end of town. Prior to the period of that where it could close, tax increment district 8 became distressed, and at that time, tax increment district 5 was left open to help tax increment district 8 and share increment within 8. 8 is now in a position where it has covered its project costs. Tax increment district 5 is solely open for the mere purpose of putting that revenue into 8 and helping it get to that place where it needed to be. So tonight in front of you, we are at the position of making the recommendation to the council to close tax increment district 5 in revenue year 2022. That last year of revenue, which will go into the next memo, would be allocated towards the affordable housing extension to develop that fund to allow us to address housing issues within the city. So this first resolution that's in your packet tonight just gives us the authority then, if passed, to communicate with the Department of Revenue that tax increment district 5 would close and the final revenue collection would be this year 2022 for the tax year 21.
Mr. Mayor, I want to make a motion that we approve Resolution 042201, Tax Increment District Termination for TID number 5.
Second?
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve Resolution 042201. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, call the roll.
Alderman Kittle?
Yes.
Alderman Vries?
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Montello,
Yes.
Alderman Volkert,
Yes.
Alderman Kraft.
Yes.
That motion passes. Item 7.2 is the resolution 042202, Tax Incremental District Affordable Housing Extension for TID number 5.
Mayor and Council, and as briefly mentioned in the agenda item previously, this particular resolution covers the aspect of taking that revenue, the last collection year of 2022 increment in Tax Increment District 5, and putting that towards an affordable housing fund that the city would then be able to utilize those funds in accordance with the tax increment law to address affordable housing as the city sees fit. Within the resolution, there's a variety of items that are identified in the resolution itself that talks about grant programs, revolving loan programs, the development and implementation marketing of such programs that would allow us to then use those funds moving forward. If any questions on this resolution, I'd be happy to address it, but essentially this would just allow us, this resolution then goes to the Department of Revenue as well, so that they understand that we are allocating that last revenue increment.
I think it's important for the public to understand that we're not defining the uses of that money outside of just affordable housing initiatives. So if folks are concerned or, perhaps under the understanding that we're going to do this or that, what that's going to look like, we don't know yet. This is just giving us the ability and the funding to do some. So that's a discussion for a later date. But Mr. Mayor, I'm going to offer a motion that we approve Resolution 042202, Tax Increment District Affordable Housing Extension Resolution.
All right, we have a motion to approve Resolution 042202. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I just got a couple quick things. So this is only District 5 revenues that are going into this fund. And it's for only 1 year.
Correct.
Will this fund stay active? So if we chose 2 years from now or 3 years from now to close another district, would that last year of that district also be able to go into this fund?
Correct. So underneath the tax increment law, the city council unilaterally has the option to extend any tax increment district by 1 year. Or if we, in this case where we are closing a potential tax increment district early, that last year of collection, you can earmark those funds as part of the affordable housing fund. Those funds are then moved into a special revenue fund. They're outside of the tax increment district at that point in time. And then those funds, based upon how the council sees and deems fit to use those in the future, it could be a revolving fund, it could be a one-time use of funding, but that is the next step that Alderman Montello is talking about too, about how to create that program around those funds. So as we discussed at the work session too, on the 28th tax increment district number 8, also one of those areas that we had discussed to leave open and allocate that final revenue year towards the tax increment district 5. We anticipate $350,000 to $400,000 in revenue collection to be able to that fund.
Just for the people at home listening that, might not know what a TIF is or how it works, or, so the year after, so 2023 taxes will then go to the entities that they were initially intended to. So the school would get their chunk, the Northwood College would get their chunk, we would get our chunk.
So actually for tax increment 5 for 2022, which is collected in 23, would go back. So for this particular year, it's the collections from 21 that are collected in 22 that will be going towards the funds. Actually, a year sooner, the jurisdictions would be getting that tax base put back onto the tax roll.
Okay.
Relative to Alderman Kittle's question, do we have a game plan as to when we're going to talk about what the affordable housing fund, how that may be used? We got a game plan for when we're going work on that?
We would be starting to work on that this summer. So I would anticipate sometime in May, we'll start that conversation during the work session. And then depending upon how long, that might take a couple sessions to discuss and
Thank you.
Hey, Rayanne, that fund does not exist yet, is that right?
correct.
Thank you.
All right, is there any other discussion? Hearing none, call the roll.
Alderman Vries,
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Montello,
Yes.
Alderman Volkert,
Yes.
Alderman Kraft,
Yes.
Alderman Kittle.
Yes.
All right, and that motion passes. Item number 8.1, Community Development Block Grant Application.
Good evening, Mayor Horton and City Council. We have 4 items tonight listed under our public hearing. And so we haven't had a public hearing actually at a council meeting for some time. So just as a refresher, we'll go through all 4 items. The mayor then would declare the public hearing closed, and then we would vote on the 4 items afterwards. So our first item is the Community Development Block Grant application. This grant is somewhat unique in that we're actually required to have a public hearing, just giving the council and the community at large information about the grant application. And then there's 2 resolutions for your consideration. One is the authorization to submit the application, and the other resolution is committing matching funds if we were to receive the grant funding. So there's a few slides on your screen. The CDBG program is a federal program, so it's federal dollars administered at the state level and really focused, hence the name, focusing on community development with a special focus on benefiting low to moderate income community members. This year, we have $10 million available statewide. The maximum award is $1 million. There's a $1 match for every $2 in funds. So if you received $1 million in grant funds, you'd have to commit $500,000 towards the program. So $10 million is a lot, but potentially that's only 10 projects in the whole state getting funded if they all were to receive that maximum amount. Eligible activities, this is a pretty wide list. Libraries are included, homeless shelters, food pantries, accessibility improvements to public facilities, water system improvements. Our proposed project for the grant application is to apply for funding for the new library. Our existing library was built in 1963, last remodeled in 1989. And if you look at the service population today, is about double what it was in 1989 when our last addition was done. So our existing facility lacks the natural lighting, open space, flexible furnishings, power outlets, meeting space, off-street parking. So the proposed project for the purpose of the grant would be to apply for up to $1 million towards the construction of a new public library at the site of the old middle school. The site is currently a vacant parcel. There's no proposed residential displacement. This is a requirement of the program as well. So the city's not buying houses, tearing them down to put a library up. In terms of the timeline, we would submit the application in May. We would actually already find out in late July or early August of this year. If we were successful, we'd have training in the fall. And then for purpose of the grant, construction would have to begin no later than July 1st of next year. The project would have to be completed by October 31st of 2024. So if we were to receive funds, as some of you may recall, we actually received CDBG grant maybe 2015 or so, and actually had to turn the grant back. So that does happen from time to time. There could be the case where a community is notified in July or August that they've received the award, and a community might find out they weren't successful, and if the community that received the award said actually we're not ready to break ground, they may go to the next community on the list. So I would also say even if you receive a rejection letter in the summer, you may find out later in the fall or winter that, hey, more funds became available. And then just final reminder, project information about the building project is available on the library website. We have the URL link on the screen there. So it's enrichmentlibrary.org/building. We've had 3 public meetings so far on the project, and more meetings to come as the project moves forward. So that's it for the purposes of the CDBG application. We do also have a sign-up a sign-in sheet going around the room. That's another requirement for the grant. We have to show who is in attendance at the meeting tonight. So if there's any questions from the council, happy to answer them.
Yeah, and before we get into questions, why don't we go ahead and declare the public hearing open, not only for the Community Development Block Grant application, but Ordinance 574, length of term for elected officials, vacation of easements on Woodland Creek Development, and vacating easements on 525 North Knowles. Way for vacating some easements. That way we're kind of covered with the public hearing. So, does anybody have any questions for Noah?
Then we'll, I think Michelle will take our next item, Ordinance 574, length of term for elected officials.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll just bring this up. This is a topic that started last October, and the idea was brought forward in order to bring a little more consistency around the term changes for aldermen, and also it kind of matches then the school board's term changes. We prepared an ordinance that would change aldermanic terms to 3 years, with 2 aldermen being elected each year. So I reviewed at the last 2 work sessions ago the steps in order to have that. So the draft ordinance was presented, notice went into the newspaper, and now we're at the public hearing. In order to move forward to the next steps, this is an ordinance that has to pass by a 2/3 vote. From there, we publish it in the paper, and we wait 60 days in order for the public to comment on it. At the June 20th meeting, or at June 20th, I would have to file the charter ordinance, and then at the work session after that, I would be able to present a resolution on what the voting cycle would look like at that point. I know there was discussion on this at the last work session. I don't know if there were further questions.
I just have one question, Michelle.
Yep.
So under kind of the time frame for how this would happen,
Mm-hmm.
you have in 2023 spring election, aldermanic districts 1 and 2 run for 3-year term, and then down to 2025, 5 and 6 run for a 3-year term.
Yep,
So how does that work? Because being just reelected in 2022, we would actually be up for reelection in 2024 for.
correct, but once the ordinance changes, you're then at a 3-year term. And so that is, the resolution is what sets the election cycle immediately after the ordinance change.
Okay.
And so I haven't put a ton into all the different scenarios that you can vote on as a resolution, but essentially, once the ordinance changes to a 3-year term, it's a 3-year term. And so this is one possible, Nick can probably expound on it too, but there's a couple different communities that have changed it recently, and they all look differently. Some people had their candidates run for a 1-year term if they were in that place in their cycle, and other people said, nope, you're 3 years starting right now. So this is an option for the upcoming election cycle, but it would just be one of the resolutions I would bring to that work session.
Okay. So this isn't like in stone.
No, we're not voting on anything to do with what the 23, 24, and 25 election cycle would look like. Right now, what this ordinance is voting on is, do you like the idea better of 2 aldermen up for election each year,
Okay.
rather than the current that is 3?
So to
And
Alderman
Michelle,
Kraft, go ahead, Pete.
Michelle, the mayor's term would remain at a 2-year term, which would allow more for aldermen to run for the mayor's position also.
Correct.
So to Alderman Kraft, sorry, I don't know if I'll ever get used to saying that, the alderman part. So if this is adopted at some point, you're saying that current office holders, their term they ran for a 2-year term that could be changed to a 3-year term?
Correct, which is why.
Without the benefit of a new election that says that's a 3-year term?
Correct, and that is the purpose, though, of that 60-day publishing it in the paper and really giving the public an opportunity to weigh in before that ordinance actually
So
becomes an ordinance.
it would be entirely conceivable, the idea of somebody running for a 1-year term, that sounds like anathema to me. I'll just throw that out there. But You could have, okay, so 3 people were just elected. 2 of those, for example, 2 of those seats could be made 3-year terms. One of them could be a 2-year term. All we're trying to do is create a cycle.
Correct.
So there's, and I guess relative to a question that was put to me, this is merely one example.
Yes.
But there's lots of, well, there's different examples of the way this could be done to facilitate getting these to 3-year terms.
Correct. I mean, it is, and I don't want to make it confusing, but next spring, 1 and 2 could run for a 3-year term, 3 could run for a 1-year term, and then, but it doesn't have to happen that way. Once the ordinance takes effect, you will then make a resolution for the voting
scheduling.
cycle. Correct.
Okay.
And those will be presented, but it's a little bit further off. And Nick, feel free to correct me if I'm presenting it incorrectly.
No, you're exactly right. And what I was going to say is that the council will have the authority to determine what's fair and what's reasonable. You know, is running for a 1-year term reasonable, or does it make sense to extend the term for 2 of the seats to become? So it's just a question of policy as to what you deem the most reasonable, that we can get to that cycle where you do have 2 seats every year that are up for 3 years.
That makes sense.
Can you just, I'm sorry, the process for adopting this, so what is, I know we're in a public hearing right now, but when it comes time for action, it would be basically, if there was an action to move on this, you would be adopting the ordinance, and then it goes to the publishing in the paper, that whole business, and it would be a couple months from now before this could be official, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Correct.
Well,
So
it would be official right away.
no, so it would become adopted, and then
Yeah.
it would become published. It would not become effective until 60 days after next Thursday, which is the day that it publishes, is next Thursday in the newspaper, if it gets passed tonight. And so, and it only will get published next Thursday if it's a 2/3 vote tonight. So if we get 4 yeses.
But what I'm curious about is you would publish it and not necessarily know, well, yeah, but you wouldn't know what the plan is to implement. Is that correct?
The plan would come forward after that 60 days, after it actually became an ordinance, then we would prepare. And I mean, I can prepare the drafts for
No,
the
it's
next
fine. We're-
work session if we want
yeah,
to. We just haven't brought those forward because there's
I'm
kind of
just
a
saying
bit
that
of time.
it's not required that the implementation plan, if this passes, I don't know,
Yeah.
right? But if it passes, the implementation plan doesn't have to be determined even now or even before the end of the 60 days.
It needs to be determined in the fall so that when nomination papers come out, we know who needs to take them out.
Got it.
But at that point.
Got it, okay.
So sometime over the summer would be best, and it allows that 60 days of feedback from the public.
Sure.
And I would suggest that you not take up the implementation plan during those 60 days, because electors have the right to file a petition. That's the purpose of that 60 days, is for electors to file a petition to challenge if in fact they desire to do that. Is that likely? But the reality is that the statute provides for that process, and so once you get clear, ordinance becomes effective and then implementation.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that topic? All right, next, vacation of easements.
Council, I have the next 2 items. They're both vacating of easements. And I think Michelle's going to bring up a map here for us. So the first one we have is vacating of easements in Woodland Creek. We have an application that you'll hear from Katrina here in a little bit, Pinewood Trails Townhome Condos. And to have them get their plan approved, we need to vacate the easements. So they have lots 54 through 57 in Woodland Creek Edition. And at the map that you see up there, anything that's inside of all 4 of those lots, easements-wise, are what we're asking to vacate. So it's pretty simple. They're going to be laying a condo plat on top of this. We need to vacate the easements that are currently there. Okay? That's the first one. The second one is vacating easements on Lot 2 of the Skoglund's property. You'll see the map up there. As you know, the Richmond Medical Facility will be going on this lot on the Skoglund's property. The sale is either currently taking place or has taken place to the group already. The site plan has been approved, And to make sure that they're putting the road and the easements in place, we have to vacate the current easements that are there, and then there'll be a new set of easements that'll be laid down there right after these are vacated, if that's the wishes of the city council. So those two vacation of easements are required for new development.
Yep.
That's it.
All right. Any questions from the public on any of these four? All right, hearing none. So does anybody else wish to speak? Does anybody else wish to speak? Does anybody else wish to speak? All right, hearing none, I'll declare the public hearing closed. And we move on to item 9.1, which is Resolution 042-203, authorization to submit a CDBG application.
I would like to make a motion to authorize submit CBG application.
But adopting resolution,
Mm-hmm.
Yep,
Oh,
so there's a motion to adopt Resolution
2203.
042-203. Is there a second to that
I'll
motion?
second that.
We have a motion. and a
Clarification,
second.
it's not a CBD, correct? CDB?
The agenda says CDBG. So that's
Thank
how
you.
I'm
No, if
reading
you're
it.
disappointed, no, it's not CBD.
I'm sure it's good for your health, though, if you're into that. Anyway, is there any other discussion before I get myself into trouble? All right, call the roll.
Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Montello,
Yes.
Alderman Volkert,
Yes.
Alderman Kraft,
Yes.
Alderman Kittle,
Yes.
Alderman Vries.
Yes.
All right, and that motion passes. Item 9.2 is Resolution 042-204, authorization to commit matching funds for CDBG application.
Mr. Mayor, I'd make a motion to approve Resolution 042204, commitment of matching funds.
All right.
Second that.
We have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 042204. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, call the roll.
Alderman Montello,
Yes.
Alderman Volkert,
Yes.
Alderman Kraft,
Yes.
Alderman Kittle,
Yes.
Alderman Vries,
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier.
Yes.
That motion passes. Item 9.3, Ordinance 574, length of term for elected officials.
I'll offer a motion that we approve ordinance 574.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve Ordinance 574, length of term for elected officials. I presume it's suspend the rules. And is there any discussion? Hearing none, call the roll.
Alderman Volkert,
Yes.
Alderman Kraft,
Yes.
Alderman Kittle,
Yes.
Alderman Vries,
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Montello.
Yes.
That motion passes. Item 9.4, Resolution 042205, vacation of easements, Woodland Creek Development.
I make a motion that we approve resolution 042205.
All right,
Second.
there's a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 042205. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, call the roll.
Alderman Kraft,
Yes.
Alderman Kittle,
Yes.
Alderman Vries,
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Montello,
Yes.
Alderman Volkert.
Yes.
And that motion passes. Item 9.5, Resolution 042206, vacating of easements 525 North Knolls.
I make a motion to approve resolution 042206.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve Resolution 042206. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, call the roll.
Alderman Kittle,
Yes.
Alderman Vries,
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Montello,
Yes.
Alderman Volkert,
Yes.
Alderman Kraft.
Yes.
That motion passes. New business, 10.1, preliminary and final plat applications, Pinewood Trail Townhomes.
Good evening, City Council. Today I'll be discussing Pinewood Trail Townhomes preliminary and final condo plat. Slide, please. Duffy's Properties LLC is applying for the preliminary and final condo plat process concurrently. They are proposing to build townhome condominium units on lots 54 through 57 of Woodland Creek subdivision. Next slide. The application went to our DRC. We issued a public notice. It gained Plan Commission recommendation for approval at the meeting last week, and final action will occur at this meeting. The site is located in the Woodland Creek development off of County Highway A. Future land use guides this for medium-high density residential, and it is Zone Z4 General Urban District, both of which allow multifamily dwellings. Surrounding the subject site are townhomes, single-family homes, parkland, and turkey farms. The proposed site is compatible with the surrounding land uses. The plan consists of 14 units in two two-story buildings. They are utilizing a condominium plat which allows for shared green space, narrower lots, and a more flexible lot coverage allotment. Setbacks meet and exceed our ordinance requirements. The units will be accessed off of Pinewood Trail on 10 single driveways and 2 shared driveways referenced on the plat. The driveways as presented meet our ordinance. Each unit will have a 2-car garage and a 2-car driveway, which totals 56 parking spaces. This exceeds our ordinance of 21 parking spaces being required in this district. There is also an off-road trail on the proposed site. City staff approved of the removal of the northwestern outlet of the trail in red due to safety concerns with the pedestrian ramp being in the middle of a driveway. Trail connectivity will be preserved with the southern trail on the planned site in yellow after the county highway trail is built this summer. As far as landscaping goes, there is a tree line on the western side of the proposed site that will remain along with the addition of plantings on the front and sides of the development. 5 trees will be removed and replaced elsewhere. All exterior lighting will be downcast 90 degrees per our ordinance. Waste bins will be screened out of view within each unit's garage. Utilities that need to be relocated will be at the developer's expense, and their stormwater plan has been approved by our engineering consultant, David Schofield. City staff and Plan Commission recommends approval of the condo preliminary and final plat with the conditions in the memo. Are there any comments or questions?
Questions?
I'm just trying to lay my eyes on, I'm looking at the map. So is it before the development that Creative Homes has built a lot of homes in? Is this, when I say before, so it would be north of there? Is this the old Lloyd Johnson property?
That,
next to the oak tree.
I would not know the answer to that.
The house, they took the outbuilding down, the house has been turned into I think it's a commercial space.
I don't know if Bob Meyer retired a couple years ago.
Well, you need to get up to speed. And remember when Fred lived there, so anyhow.
This is south of the Whispering Prairie, right? That,
No,
Willow Wind.
Way south of that.
It's south of Willow Wind.
it's like Willow River.
Willow River
something.
Bluffs.
Yeah.
Sorry. It's south of there, and it's just north of the basketball tennis court
Yes.
area in Woodland Creek.
Oh, got it.
Northernmost entrance, it's closest.
So
Not the tennis court entrance.
So,
Correct, not the tennis court entrance.
so it's on the east side of County Road A,
Yes.
not the west side.
No.
Like my map got a dot and it says site that's on the west side. So somebody was trying to throw me off.
We wanted to see if you were looking at your packet.
All right.
I'm gonna look up Lloyd Johnson's property, by the way.
What's the one that
Motion to approve the preliminary plat.
All right, so there's a motion to approve the preliminary and final plat.
I'll
for
second it.
Pinewood Trail
With the conditions that
with the conditions listed, and we do have a second. Alderman Weinmeier, is there any discussion? Hearing none, call the roll.
Alderman Vries,
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Montello,
Yes.
Alderman Volkert,
Yes.
Alderman Kraft,
Yes.
Alderman Kittle.
Yes.
That motion passes. Item 10.2 is the NRMC 117 Subdivision Ordinance Amendments.
Here in City Council, before you today, we have an amendment fairly large to our Ordinance 117, our subdivision ordinance. City staff has taken a number of months to review this. We've ran it past our consulting planner, Dan Licht, past attorney Nick Vivian, and it went to the Planning Commission this past week. Basically, the process that we've taken is went to Development Review Committee. We had the public notice. It was at the Plan Commission and today in front of you for final approval.
Mr. Mayor, I want to move that we, I'm sorry, you
Well,
weren't done? You were just catching your
Sure.
breath?
I was going to give you a little synopsis, but if you're ready to go,
No,
I was just,
the 63 pages here is kind of giving me a little synopsis, but please go ahead.
super light reading for everybody, and everyone has for sure read this all. We do have some things that were moved from this ordinance to a separate ordinance, street addressing for sure. That's happening. And then there's some other things that happen with grammatical errors, repetitions, redundancies. So we've had this ordinance in place since 2015. We wanted to look at it holistically and make some changes that make sense for the city of Richmond. So my next comment was going to be if Nick had any comments or changes, because the Planning Commission made a motion to recommend approval if it was reviewed by our city attorney. So I'm going to turn over to Nick just for a second here.
Oh, and I've taken a look at all of the pages. Obviously, there are lots of red lines. I think Beth and staff did a really nice job going through the ordinance and make necessary to update it to our current use and what we needed. So I don't have any substantive changes. I have a couple of housekeeping items that I'll take up with. But I think from my perspective, the ordinance, the language is in the condition to adopt.
So if I offer a motion, is it to ordinance number 575, the subdivision ordinance, is just the updates? Or as changed?
As changed. So there's some things that were taken out and some things that were added. So kind of as changed.
So, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to offer a motion that we approve this ordinance 575 subdivision ordinance as changed and presented tonight.
I would second that.
All right, there's a motion and a second to accept to pass the ordinance 575, section 117 NRMC revisions. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I've just got a question on a page 182, paragraph 71, line 6.
Subsection C.
Subsection 4, never mind. Well, I'll talk to you later about it.
Sounds good. Thanks, Craig.
Bet. All right, any other discussion? Call the roll.
Alderman Weinmeier?
Yes.
Alderman Montello?
Yes.
Alderman Volker?
Yes.
Alderman Kraft?
Yes.
Alderman Kittle?
Yes.
Alderman Vries?
Yes.
All right, and that motion passes. Item 10.3, Memorandum of Understanding, Johnson Motors.
I'll take a first shot at this and then I'm going to turn it over to Nick. So we have a request from Johnson Motors for a memorandum of understanding. So Johnson has come to us. I think we started this last summer. They're looking to do an accessory structure, and they're looking to do it up by the Johnson Ford building. Our ordinance requires that they have a principal building on the lot for an accessory building. Okay, that's kind of the basis for this. We went through the administrative permit. They went through a certified survey map where they put the lots together. We did not get that recorded as of yet, so that it was approved by the Plan Commission and approved by the City Council, but it has not been yet recorded. And then we did a conditional use permit with Johnson Ford also that allowed them to have different types of material than our zoning ordinance required. So kind of three things with this accessory structure that they're looking to put up. And in the end, and maybe Jeff will want to explain a little bit more about this, in the end, I think there was some financing information, Jeff, is that what it is that allows that you need to have this on its lot on its own? Is that a correct statement? Yes, okay. So in the end, they need the accessory structure to be on a lot on its own. So they're presenting a memorandum of understanding. And Nick has reviewed that, and I'll let him discuss that memorandum, and that's what's in front of you for approval tonight, not the other things that we discussed. We would then have to, if it's approved tonight, we would have to do a new CSM, a new certified survey map, and then finish their administrative permit to kind of let them get started.
Thank you, Beth. So the memorandum pretty clearly spells out what's happening here. There's going to be a land division to create a new lot. There's a new warehousing storage facility that's going to be built on that lot. There's already a mortgage on the dealership lot, and there will be additional financing with a mortgage related to this particular parcel. As Beth indicated, your ordinances state that in order to have an accessory structure, you've got to have a primary structure. What's happening here is that there's a lot being created with an accessory structure that's being proposed to be built on that lot. So Johnson Ford has come forth with a very reasonable proposal. From our perspective, we want to make sure that the primary lot is tied together with the parcel that has the accessory structure, right? So we understand the situation, we understand the need for the building, we understand the need for the financing, and we want to make sure that we're able to accommodate the growth of this business. And so you have before you this memorandum of understanding that we've negotiated with council for Johnson Ford. Effectively, it indicates that the city will retain approvals of subdivisions, that they'll be permitted to construct and maintain that accessory building. Ultimately, that there's going to be a deed restriction that requires common ownership of the current lot, the dealership lot, with the new lot to be created. So we're treating them as though they're all one lot, but ultimately they're going to be two separate parcels to accommodate that finance, accommodate the structure that they've proposed. Most importantly to me is that these documents are going to be recorded against the parcels. So if in fact they look to subdivide and sell, or if in fact they look to do something, restrictions are recorded against them so they will forever of record. And if they decide that they want to do something different, they will be required to come back to the city. So again, very reasonable solution and resolution here, in that they get to do what they're asking to do. We maintain consistency with the ordinance. It's of record so the public knows and understands what those restrictions are. And it's a win-win situation for both and for Johnson Ford. So happy to entertain any questions, but it's been a good process in working through this.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to offer a motion that we approve this memorandum of understanding with Johnson Motors and the provisions as it's been outlined.
Second?
All right, there's a motion and a second to approve the memorandum of understanding with Johnson Motors. Is there any discussion? None, call the roll.
Alderman Montello?
Yes.
Alderman Volkert?
Yes.
Alderman Kraft?
Yes.
Alderman Kittle?
Yes.
Alderman Vries?
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier?
Yes.
And that motion passes. Item 10.4, good luck, is commercial and residential building inspection services.
So at the end of this year, in 2022, our contract with Ben Campbell, our building inspector, will be up. And we wanted to take a look at this early on. As you all know, and the trouble we had last time, it's really challenging to find building inspectors. So I got in there early. I worked on a contract with him to make sure that we could keep him. So before you, in your packet, we have a contract with our building inspector for 4 years, which I think is a really good contract. We can budget 4 years out, which I think is very good. The other thing about this contract is he did not increase his price other than from 22 to 23. It's about $3,400. And then after that, there's no increases in price for the remaining 3 years. So the contract's in your packet. I'm recommending approval. It went through Noah and Nick, and I think they're both on board with approval.
I would make a motion that we recommend approval of the proposed contract with Western Wisconsin Inspection Agency, LLC, AKA Ben Campbell, according to the contract that is attached to the packet.
You use the term recommend approval, but you mean the motion to approve.
Yep, that's what I meant.
Perfect.
I'll second that.
All right, there is a motion and a second to approve the commercial and residential building inspection services contract. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Mayor, just one comment. I had made a recommendation regarding insurance, and I think there's just a brief need to take a look at the type of insurance that we have. If you would just give staff the authority to finalize the insurance provisions of this contract, that would be appreciated.
Is there any objection from the motion or second? All right, so those noted. Any other discussion? Call the roll.
Alderman Volkert,
Yes.
Alderman Kraft,
Yes.
Alderman Kittle,
Yes.
Alderman Vries,
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Montello.
Yes.
That motion passes. Item 10.5, Utilities Commission recommendation, award purchase of electrical department mini excavator.
One of the items that was identified in our 2022 capital improvement plan was a mini excavator to be used by the electric department. Per our purchasing policy, because this item is over $25,000, it goes both to the utility commission and then to the city council this evening. And Wes Arndt, our electric superintendent, is available virtually as well if you have specific questions about this piece of equipment. Included in the packet, you can see they received bids on the Bobcat, John Deere, and they highlighted a few different variations, features, and it also notes the lead time. As all of you know, the lead time on some things recently have been several weeks, several months out. So the recommendation from staff, as well as from the Utility Commission, was to proceed with purchasing the purchase order of a Midwest Machinery Company for John Deere 35G with an angle blade option. Expected delivery of April 15th, so it'll be available later this week, right here in Richmond. And the quoted price is $58,367.34. If you notice in the bids that are listed in here, they had both a straight and an angle blade option. The preference from staff was the angle blade. And then you can also see the variation in the lead time. So between the Bobcat and the John Deere, 3-month lead time versus getting it this week, and also just working with a local business, being able to have the service done right here in town. So if you have any specific questions, Wes is available virtually, but otherwise, the recommendation from both staff and the Utility Commission was to proceed with the John Deere.
So Noah, basically the reason that the recommendation came from the Utility Commission for that particular unit had to do with delivery time, because there is a difference in price. But is it because of its immediate availability?
Yeah, that was one of the drivers. Just that 3 months out and the time that you're using this equipment is largely the summer months. So the fact we could already start using this equipment this month.
Mr. Mayor, I'll offer a motion that we approve the electric department mini excavator as recommended by the Utility Commission for that John Deere that they can take delivery of next week.
Yeah, 15th, it's already this Friday.
Yeah, that's this Friday. Oh, it's tax day, sorry. I winced.
18th is the tax day, next month.
Oh, that's right, it's 18th, okay.
Second the motion?
Yep, there's a motion and a second for the approval of the John Deere excavator, mini excavator. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, call the roll.
Alderman Kraft,
Yes.
Alderman Kittle,
Yes.
Alderman Vries,
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Montello,
Yes.
Alderman Volkert.
Yes.
All right, and that motion passes. Item 10.6, Utilities Commission recommendation, bidding of 2022 street and utility projects.
We're getting close to completion on the design and the bidding documents for the 22 street and utility project, which includes the North 4th Street that's north of 64 from the medical center over to 120th Street or County K. That would be street reconstruction. No utilities are involved in that project. And then the other piece of the 22 project would be Oak Avenue from 3rd Street to 5th Street. That would be a complete reconstruction of the road with full utilities. So we're getting close to bidding. We're looking at possibly bidding end of April, and then we would hopefully have some bids to bring back to council with an award recommendation at the May meeting. I'd welcome any questions at this time, but our recommendation would be to move forward with bidding.
I'm just curious, Eric, is there a typo on this memo that we have?
It's possible.
Well, I don't see like a block and a half of East First Street on there for resurfacing. I was just curious if you missed that.
If you want to bump the budget up, we can add it.
Well, no, it was just, hey, there was a small dog in the neighborhood went missing, and somebody actually went and looked and found it in the street completely unharmed. Couldn't get hit by a car because it was beneath the street level, but hey.
Ouch.
There is another round. I don't know if you've heard of all the Bureau, or not, the BIL infrastructure funding that's been coming out. There is some funding through the state SDP funding. There's a new round coming up. I think the applications are due in May, and that street might be one of our possible candidates.
So just a couple more months.
Before we know if we have funding.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah,
Perfect.
The design and construction would be probably a couple years out. But
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to offer a motion that we approve the bidding of, the Utility Commission's recommendation, bidding of 2022 street and utility projects.
All right, there's a motion to approve the bidding of 2022 street and utility project. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
So Eric, these are this year's
this year, so
road
it'd be
projects.
construction this
that
year.
we haven't even bidded these yet?
Have not bid them yet. We didn't get authorization to start design work till January, so this is actually doing pretty well.
Okay.
Any other discussion? All right, call the roll.
Alderman Kittle?
Yes.
Alderman Vries?
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier?
Yes.
Alderman Montello?
Yes.
Alderman Volkert?
Yes.
Alderman Kraft?
Yes.
That motion passes. Item 10.7, authorization to install sidewalk along East Hughes Street.
So there's an existing sidewalk on the east side of North Arch. And it actually ends just like a property short of Hughes Street. We'd like to continue that sidewalk to the north and then make that connection from Arch over to Green on the south side of Hughes. The work will be done by city staff, so this will all be done in-house. So there won't be a huge cost to this project. Just according to our ordinances, city council's got to approve a new sidewalk that's not currently in that place. This was reviewed and approved by a Public Works Committee.
So Eric, I think you've met with a property owner on North Green and Hughes.
Yep, we've notified all the property owners, and I've met with a couple of them about the project.
But this gentleman reached out to me probably a month ago. I was unaware of this project, and now I know why I was unaware. It was a Public Works Committee and had never come to the council. Were you able to address his concerns adequately? I know there was a tree he's concerned about, and are we square there?
Yep, I met with him a few months back also about the tree. And then I think Wes also met with him to talk about a
Lights.
possible, light and electrical service. Yeah, I think we've taken care of all his concerns.
Good.
All right,
I'd like to make a motion to extend the highest sidewalk on East Hughes Street.
all right, there's a motion to install a sidewalk. Is there a second?
I'd second that.
A second. Is there any discussion? Call the roll.
Alderman Vries?
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier?
Yes.
Alderman Montello?
Yes.
Alderman Volkert?
Yes.
Alderman Kraft?
Yes.
Alderman Kittle?
Yes.
That motion passes. Item 10.8 is a sidewalk on Oak Avenue.
This is part of our street and utility project. There is an existing sidewalk on the west side of Oak, however, it ends near the hockey rink. So we would be looking at extending that sidewalk through a new property to connect out to Fifth Street. There is a number of trees that will have to be taken out to allow the sidewalk to be constructed. We'll plan on replacing those trees with some, likely this fall, after the project's done.
Offer motion that we approve the Oak Avenue sidewalk proposal.
Second?
All right, there's a motion and a second to do a sidewalk on Oak Avenue. Is there any discussion? Call the roll.
Alderman Weinmeier?
Yes.
Alderman Montello?
Yes.
Alderman Volkert?
Yes.
Alderman Kraft?
Yes.
Alderman Kittle?
Yes.
Alderman Vries?
Yes.
That motion passes. Item 10.9, paid time off employee handbook addendum.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So city staff has been utilizing paid time off for vacations, illnesses, appointments, et cetera. Periodically, we like to go through and update policies within the handbook. This is one that we would like to have a chance to review and propose a recommended update for City Council. The first kind of change to the policy you guys have in your packet, you guys should have had a red line copy, is just updating the table itself to make it a little bit more clear of when people move to the next tier. It's not changing when they move, it's just changing the language so it's clear when you move to the next tier. Another section that we're looking to just remove is the portion of when the conversion happened. So there was some language in there because there was a conversion from vacation and sick bank to PTO. That language is still just in the policy that we'd just like to remove because it's not relevant anymore. And then the last proposed change to the policy is just changing the increments that staff can utilize PTO. So for non-exempt staff, allowing them to utilize it in 15-minute increments, and for exempt staff, utilizing it a minimum of 2 hours, but then could utilize it in a 30-minute increment if they so choose. So staff is looking to recommend that policy change at the end. It just indicates that to the extent that the collective bargaining agreement conflicts with the policy, that the collective bargaining agreement controls for that. So staff is recommending approval of the updated policy as provided in your packet.
Yeah, kind of.
I am guessing they are
This
waiting
is
for
the
you.
first time I think the council's seeing this, and there's some changes. Up.
I just actually, just if I can say this, Sarah sent it out the end of last week.
Correct.
And I just for what it's worth, I asked her, kind of had just a really light discussion about this. And as it was explained to me, the basic intent mainly is to allow people to take PTO in very small increments, which right now, what is the smallest increment you can take, a half a day?
For exempt staff, it's a half a day,
Okay.
which is slightly confusing in the fact that we have flexible schedules, and so what's a half a day? And then for non-exempt staff, it's in an hour increment. And so if someone just needs to leave 15 minutes early because they need to go pick up a kiddo at 3 o'clock and they get done at 3:30, they'd have to take an actual hour of PTO to do that.
So really, that is the meat of this, is just changing that you can take your PTO in smaller increments.
Correct.
Is
It's
this,
theirs to take,
is this kind of
so-
a normal?
Because, all right, so maybe I'm confused here, because I'll say the red line document, and correct me if I'm wrong, is basically changing from your 24th year to a 10th year. Is that correct?
So there isn't any change in when people move tiers. So what it had before was it said between years
see.
10 to 24, and people
right.
were confused on if that's at the beginning of the 24th year or the end of the 24th year.
Yeah, all right, I see that. Perfect. Thank you.
I
Yeah.
apologize.
No, we're good.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question.
Yeah, ask away.
This minimum increments of PTO, is that normal with other public entities like the city of New Richmond? Does anyone know?
The question is this in the ballpark of other public entities' schedules? That
The
makes up
minimum
the amount?
increment. So I think when the policy was originally written, the administration was interested in identifying what a minimum increment would be. We also had a system that didn't allow for, I believe, quarter hours and half hours and things like that. So it was part of a system issue. I think this update, because of the payroll system update and the HR system and all of the different modules that are being implemented, it can recognize smaller increments, so as low as 15 minutes, right?
Correct.
So to the quarter hour. So I think that's part of it. I think I just mentioned to Sarah that I have no issue in, I mean, I would hope that somebody doesn't actually have to take 15 minutes of PTO. I would hope that they could flex their schedule, that would be something that we could work with them on. My only question was with the exempt status employees actually having minimum increments, because I know in Minnesota and Wisconsin is different. So Sarah and I have kind of been talking about that, but she did get a legal opinion and they felt that this met the standards laid out by the Fair Labor Standards Act. So I said, as long as that's in writing, I'm okay with it, but we wouldn't do this in Minnesota. We wouldn't put a minimum for an exempt
Have a
staff.
different kind of minimum, Carrie?
What's that?
You would have a different kind of minimum?
Well, we don't, exempt level employees aren't necessarily supposed to, you're not supposed to dock their pay when they're away from work if they've worked at all during a pay period, unless you have a bona fide PTO system. But you're also not supposed to do it if they work some hours in a day. You're not supposed to require them to take time off. So we don't do it in Minnesota. We don't require them to take any time off if they worked any hours in a day. Obviously, if people started to abuse it, we'd probably implement different policies, but if they worked 4 hours in a day, they get paid for as if they were there for the whole day. Most of it is because they typically work 10 or 11-hour days every other day of the week, so it kind of all washes out, but that's really that was my only concern with it.
And I'm
Mr. Mayor,
curious,
I'll make a
Sarah,
motion that we approve the updated part-time employee handbook addendum as presented.
All right, so there's a motion to approve. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Or a motion and a second in discussion?
just this question, Sarah. So I'm talking about a non-exempt employee. You mentioned if somebody needed to punch out 15 minutes early to pick up one of their kids. You just use that as an example.
I did.
My question is it an option? It doesn't really matter. I guess I'm just curious. If somebody had to leave, let's say that their normal workday was done at 3:30 and they had to leave at 3:15. If this policy wasn't approved, would they have the option to work 15 minutes longer the next day, come in 15 minutes early, or is that problematic? And I'm not suggesting that's the way it should be. I'm just curious.
So that would be a better question for Aaron. So really the staff that I think it would be potentially more challenging in is our Public Works Department.
Sure.
For, our office staff, things like that, it's
Yep.
not. But in Public Works and some of the other departments, that they're maybe more project-based and have like a team of staff that are working together. Staying 15 minutes, 30 minutes later to make up time isn't always.
It's challenging.
It can prove more challenging.
And really speaks to the point, if that's the case, then it really speaks to the point that this is super necessary. That if somebody, instead of docking their pay a quarter hour, and using that example, they have an opportunity to get it covered with PTO that they've accrued, because it isn't an option for them to make it up the next day or the next day, whatever. So, okay, that's all. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? All right, hearing none, call the roll.
Alderman Montello?
Yes.
Alderman Volkert?
Yes.
Alderman Kraft?
Yes.
Alderman Kittle?
Yes.
Alderman Breeze?
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier?
Yes.
And that motion passes. Item 10.10, 10.10, I suppose more correctly, request for proposals, coffee shop, cafe, tenant space in future library.
So as we've worked on the library project over the last several years, there's oftentimes been the idea of, wouldn't it be great if you could get a cup of coffee while you're at the library or have some type of food? Before we would proceed further along with the actual building plans, it's actually helpful to know this up front. It sounds a little bit like, are you jumping the gun a little bit talking about a coffee shop or a cafe in the library? But we also don't want to, on the way we're kind of viewing it, as we don't want to design a space and then find out no one's interested in running a coffee shop in the library. Or maybe there is a need for a coffee space, but you need half the footprint. And you don't want to put in walls and a door and then find out, hey, there is someone that wants to do it, but none of that makes sense, and you got to tear it all out. And so really this is intended to see if there's interest from local business or businesses in partnering together. to see if there's interest in having some type of coffee shop, cafe within the library. So we would send this out to local businesses, see what the feedback is. We might find out that there's a lot of interest and people think it's a great idea. We might find out no one's interested in running a coffee shop. As much as people would like to get a cup of coffee, we might find out that it's not a viable business endeavor. And so in which case then we look to either you scale the project down or you use that space for something else, whether that's storage or another meeting room. But it's helpful to actually know that more up front rather than just building it and hope someone will occupy it someday. So what we're seeking tonight is just authorization to send out the RFP to local businesses, see what people think of the idea, and then we'd bring it back to the council here in the next couple of months.
Very good. An action?
So it would just
I'd
be
make a motion to authorize
authorization to,
publication of the RFP as presented.
All right, so is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Motion and a second, discussion?
Yeah, you know the concern that I have, considering the information environment we just came through in the last number of weeks, and the miscommunication, which I would say was probably either deliberate or ignorance, I should say, relative to what we're doing down there. You know, we had a developer that put a picture of a 5-story building there, which if anybody looked, zoning doesn't allow 5 stories. The developer just puts a picture there to show, hey, there's a building there. And it's frustrating to me. There will be some people who are here, we're doing this, and they're saying, hey, there's gonna be a coffee shop in the library, because they missed the whole rest of the story. We're trying to find out about the viability. So, I think that the city, I think the library has done a great job of getting information out there, but it's amazing in our town, how easy it is for people, for their own gain, to spread misinformation for some benefit. And it's frustrating to me because this project has finally gotten some traction, and it's not, all of those things are not determined. We are still very much in the discovery phase, but some people would have you believe it's a done deal and here's the way it's gonna be. So I'm deliberately making a point about this because some people will think, oh, you're putting a coffee shop in the library, and that is absolutely hasn't been decided. I just want that to be, Tom, I guess that's aimed for you, not the previous part of my communication, but just please make sure your readers are aware. We're just trying to find out what the interest is at this point.
Gotcha.
Not that I would ever tell you what to write in your story, but there you go.
Gotcha.
I think you just.
Very good.
And would this,
Go ahead.
and would the city be the landlord of this space? Or we don't know right now?
The leaseholder.
so the way the RFP is drafted is that they would have a lease agreement with the city, but I would also say to that point, that hasn't been finalized yet
Okay,
either.
it could be others, could be the builder, could be,
Could be, yep.
okay.
Very good. Is there any other discussion? All right, call the roll.
Alderman Volker,
Yes.
Alderman Kraft,
Yes.
Alderman Kittle,
Yes,
Alderman Vries,
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Montello.
Yes.
And that motion passes. Item 10.11, appointment of fire inspectors. You see a list, 2 of them have already been approved by the council. It's addition of 3
Yes,
three
we
others
have-
that have gone through their training. and-
Yeah, so the council previously approved Brad Olick and Mark Schut as fire inspectors. Both have done a great job. The Public Safety Committee has had an opportunity, I think for the first time, to see inspection records, to see a list of what buildings have been inspected. And so the individuals listed here in the memo have recently completed fire inspector class. And so this would help kind of divvy up the workload with both Brad and with Mark. So the additional inspectors would be Mike Stry, Jeremy Sylvester, Nick Waters, Daryl Schut, and Josh Bell.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to offer a motion that we approve these 5 individuals to serve as fire inspectors.
second,
A third, so we have a motion, a second, and a third to approve the appointments of fire inspectors, which Noah said they're all doing an excellent job. Any discussion? Call the roll.
Alderman Kraft,
Yes.
Alderman Kittle,
yes.
Alderman Vries,
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Montello,
Yes.
Alderman Volker.
Yes.
And that motion passes. 10.12, remote participation in board, commission, and city council meetings.
This item has been discussed kind of on and off over the last couple of years during the pandemic. Prior to COVID-19, We were only doing in-person meetings. We would allow board and committee members to call in, but typically they weren't allowed to vote or count towards the quorum. Since then, we've been doing hybrid meetings, and that's kind of become the new norm. And really wanted to put something in writing to see, is that something we want to continue or not? And so what's included in your packet is really kind of a first draft of a possible policy that would hopefully strike kind of a balance, allowing remote participation first and foremost for board and commission meetings and city council meetings. So if you were virtual or on the phone, you would still have the opportunity to vote. You would still count towards having a quorum. So I think that's, even you think about 5 years ago, that probably wouldn't have been considered. So we think that that's important. That gives flexibility for board and commission members who want to serve, but may not always be able to make it. Or council members may be on vacation, or you may not be feeling well. You still want to be able to be involved and participate. The other two sections in here, one is about meeting chairpersons. In the past, we talked about, you need to have a quorum in person so that, if a member of the public comes to a meeting, tonight you could otherwise you might have 2 council members here in person and 5 virtual. Do you need to have a certain percentage here in person? And, some of the feedback we've had from chairpersons, I think Plan Commission is one of those where it's really helpful to have the chairperson actually here in person, where you get a sense of who's in the room. You're not worrying about technical issues if you can't hear things, or someone in the audience has a question. We just had a Police and Fire Commission meeting last week where the chair was virtual, however the vice chair ran the meeting because you're there in the meeting, you've got 20 people there, you're not worrying about if you could hear something or not. So the proposed policy would require the chairperson for the meeting to be in person. In the event that the chairperson wasn't able to be here, the vice chair or the vice president or another member could be appointed. So that's pretty common when we've had circumstances like that. I think for Plan Commission, like I said, most recently for Police and Fire. And then the last section is about closed session. And this would require that board and commission members and elected officials be present here in person in order to participate remotely, or in order to participate in closed session. So they would not be able to participate remotely. So, and this really just becomes more of the concern of, if someone's virtual, you don't know who else is in the room with them. They might be on speakerphone, and it might be a family member, they might be driving. And even with virtual meetings, we've had incidents where we've had members of the public trying to call in to listen to those meetings, where if you were having a closed session meeting, you could now turn the virtual meeting program off altogether. You don't have to worry about having someone on the phone. So this is a first draft at the policy. It can be revised by council. If council likes it, you could adopt it tonight. It's really up to you.
You had a member of the
Mr.
public
Mayor, I have some comments on this.
that they successfully called into a closed session meeting.
Yes.
But yeah, go ahead, Pete. I'm sorry.
I certainly know the times have changed. The pandemic has allowed lots of folks to work from home. Technology has changed. 3 or 4 years ago, no one ever heard of Zoom. I'm certainly in favor of the remote participation and also the closed session. I'm going to speak against meeting chairpersons. I think in your example where the chair chose to have the vice chair run the meeting is fine, and I think that can always happen. But to set up a policy that the chair cannot run the meeting, I would not be in favor of that.
All right, I'm going to speak to that, Pete. Here's the problem. And actually, as we look at this draft, the way it's been prepared, and I understand it's just kind of a draft, the challenges are, okay, so you have a person that is participating remotely and establishes a quorum through remote participation, and then you lose connection with them. Meeting's over. Everybody's got to go home. That just doesn't work. I think that we got to be careful. Some folks have suggested, if COVID rears its ugly head again, sure, things could be different going forward. But for the environment we're in today, and I think it's interesting, a couple of years ago, pre-COVID, we were talking about whether or not, because the question came up whether or not people should be able to participate remotely pre-COVID, and that was not a you know, like, I wouldn't say everybody was like super in favor of that.
It was a definite no from this council.
Yeah, so this is how I feel. I feel that the meeting has to be chaired by somebody who's live, assuming it's not a virtual meeting, right? We know what that is, the difference of that. But whoever chairs the meeting has to be in the room. You cannot count towards the quorum if you're participating virtually for the technology issue that if we lose you and you are the person that puts it over the deal, meeting's over, everybody's got to go home, and we don't know if we're going to reestablish contact, and you're not in contact for a while, and what does that mean?
Could be 2 hours into the meeting,
Right.
3 hours into the meeting.
And everybody has to leave. Definitely, if you're participating remotely, you can't be involved in the closed session, and I think it's really those 3 issues. I don't think remote participation should count towards establishing a quorum. The quorum has to be established by people who are live there. Whoever's chairing the meeting has to be live, and I think they've kind of discussed in here how you would establish who chairs the meeting, but they need to be present. And to be fair to the public who come, and I think about a comment somebody made to me that somebody drove an hour to attend a meeting at some time in the past, and if there was, you know, the person that's chairing the meeting is not even here, and I understand about being gone, that's not the point. I think that to make it work better, so I'm sorry I got off point, but remote participation would not count towards, you can participate remotely, but that wouldn't count towards satisfying the quorum. The meeting has to be chaired by somebody who is in attendance, and if you are participating remotely, you cannot participate in the closed session. That's what my proposal, in fact, I'm going to put that in the form of a motion tonight. And I just wanted to say in the memo that came out, it talks about Public Works and Public Safety as a 3-member board. Well, they're 5-member boards now, so we have to go with a different example there.
Mike, before you make a motion, I just want to say that.
I already did, but okay.
Oh, okay. Well,
All right. So maybe
The motion so we can
Yeah,
have
that's good.
discussion.
Yeah, perfect.
perfect. So what is laid out in the draft policy is that people who are participating remotely do count towards the establishment of a quorum.
Right, and my motion would change that.
Would be that
Gotcha.
second sentence under remote participation. So it would read, members who participate remotely shall not count towards the establishment of a quorum.
Okay.
I think that is going way too far personally. I think that allowing a person who is in attendance remotely should count towards a quorum.
And Pete, it just doesn't make sense. This has nothing to do with fairness. Well, to be fair to the people who are there, if we lose a connection, and it's happened before, I don't know if it was the quorum person, but we've had people that were attending remotely and we lost them.
Happened.
I understand about the chair, but I do not understand how you can't be counted toward the quorum if you are working remotely.
Pete, how would somebody know you're there? We don't, at these council meetings, we know, I think we've lost the connection, but I think there could be committee meetings, we wouldn't even necessarily know we lost the person. And that's your legal reason for being together, is that you have a quorum established.
I think it's pretty obvious you can see who's at the meeting, who's attending. When you take votes, it's done by roll call. I mean, I've chaired the tourism committee in chambers with one other person, and the other 3 members were remote. And you're saying that we wouldn't have a meeting if that was the situation?
That's correct. You have to be there to establish a quorum. That's
I think
correct.
you're making that too difficult. I know you were not in favor of adding committee members because you were worried about not having quorum. I think you're making it very restrictive by requiring actual participation, physical participation.
Pete, just for the record, I don't know where you came up with that comment you just made. I didn't say that. What I said was, I think the memo identifies 3-person committees, and they actually are 5 people members. I don't know what the basis for that comment about I was against committees, because it's a great idea to have public, and I've gone on record as saying that. So I'm going to call for the question, Mr. Mayor.
Any other discussion?
I'm confused only because the draft policy that I read and considered doesn't have the, Noah, you're saying that under remote participation, there's a second statement that say they shall not count towards the establishment of a quorum. I don't see that anywhere.
No, that would
It's
be.
going to be in
That's
part
part
of
of his motion.
It's going to be changed to that.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, In my mind, I do think that that's also a little bit too restrictive. I think over the course of the last 2 years, we've proven that we've made significant advances in technology. I haven't been a part of any meeting where a quorum was in jeopardy because somebody lost contact. I think that people have lost contact, but we haven't lost our quorum in the process. So I do think that that's too restrictive. I'm in favor of ensuring that the chairperson is at the meeting, and also that closed session, you can't participate unless you're in person. I'm not in favor of restricting to the level that you suggested in your motion, Mike.
Any other discussion? Call the roll.
Alderman Kittle?
No.
Alderman Vries?
No.
Alderman Weidmeier?
Yes.
Alderman Montello?
Yes.
Alderman Volker?
Yes.
Alderman Kraft?
No.
Look at that, Fred.
Purpose, you know. I did it on purpose, you know.
Aye.
This could be your last vote.
It's going to be, most likely it is the last vote. And there's good arguments on both sides. I struggle with the, I'm going to say yes. So the motion passes. Item 10.13, fourth quarter 21 financial report.
And council, I think, well, we have some slides prepared. And the report, I think, is now attached to the agenda. So that will then also be made available on the department's website following tonight's meeting. Really just kind of wanted to highlight, obviously with the budget amendments that are brought forward in March, we go over some of the very top level aspects of revenues and expenditures for the city's general fund. But on the fourth quarter, we want to do just a little bit deeper of a dive, ask any questions that you may have, and highlight a few other components that we weren't able to do as part of that. We'll go to the first slide. From a revenue perspective, total revenues for general fund were 7.8 million, which accounted for 112% of the budget. There were some decreases in revenue compared to the same time last year, mainly driven from the CARES Act funding, which is a one-time source. Building permit revenue continued to remain strong in 2021, exceeding budget by 50%, so it was budget. And overall, the areas of miscellaneous revenues came in significantly higher, and that was mainly attributable to from an expenditure standpoint, expenditures were just under 8 million at 7. Or 113% of budget. Now, although you look at revenues and expenditures and we see a deficit, that deficit's mainly driven by expenditures due to revenue. So those one-time transfers were the double G land sale, at total land sale, into the general fund as revenue and then went out of the general fund as an expenditure and was appropriated over into the projects fund to help reduce the expense of the police department addition. Additionally, the 2020 surplus funds that we had, which were approximately $500,000 that were carried forward, 386,000 of that was attributable to capital improvement projects for 2021. In 2021, however, we only had to transfer over $200,000 of that surplus projects. So the largest share of why we see those expenditures higher than revenue is driven of those sale proceeds and then the surplus funds that came into the general. And then lastly, there were overall departments we're on track with budget, either right on target, slightly under, but there were some notable areas of higher than anticipated expenses. Legal expenses, as well as some city fire calls that were higher than we had budgeted. Those city fire calls are expenses that are not able to be billed. But all those things were also offset by favorable spending. Result of the police department overtime, which had a favorable variance to budget by $50,000. All the police department is now on a different shift schedule than they were before. Benefit from a budgetary. Did make a slight adjustment in the 2020 at overtime as a result of seeing some of that, and so as we go into the 2020, but that shift in their operations has certainly helped from a budgetary standpoint. Recaps by revenue category for general fund revenues as a total. Again, you can see prior year's total revenues at 7.6 million, 2021's at 7.8, and that intergovernmental last year was at 1.9, this year was at 1.7. Again, that other than that, there were not really any other notable fluctuations in revenue.
Hey, Rayanne, you keep cutting out on my end.
Me also.
I will try my best on the mic here. On the expenditure side, the 2020 expenditures you'll see were significantly less than 2021 expenditures. That's due to cost containment strategies that were put in place as part of the COVID-19. So when we look at year over year or averaged expenditures, 2021 is slightly higher than the 5-year average, but again, that's due to the amount of transfers out of just over $1 million. When we exclude those transfers out over 2021, the total expenditures come in line with what a 5-year average would typically be. Other than that, other areas within each department fairly close to budget or slightly above budget. Questions on the revenue or expenditure? Next slide. From a fund balance, and we did cover this as part of the budget amendments, the city's fund balance remains very strong at just over $3.6 million. That's a combination of our unrestricted funds, the assigned funds, and non-spendable funds. We had that modest increase from prior year of $32, which is still an increase. But when we look at the mix of how those funds have changed, certainly on the unrestricted funds, we saw the growth there increasing by $488,000, and assigned funds and non-spendable funds decreasing. Now we're becoming funds as unrestricted. So the fund balance grows to 44.7% of revenues. That is, although higher than our target in the recommendation from General Government Finance Officers Association, it exceeds that level. We do expect to see that fund balance go down slightly because of those funds that were the carry forward of the 2020 surplus funds. Again, we did not expend all of those for the capital improvement projects because of supply chain issues, but would utilize those funds that were assigned for those projects in revenue percentage come down. Lastly, from a general obligation debt perspective, and this slide is maybe a little bit difficult to see, but the important number is on that very last bar which is our general debt outstanding at year end, which is 15 point. And that does include the debt that was issued in 21, which we issued $2.3 million of new debt, and we refinanced $2.3 million in debt from the 2011 and 2012 issuances. And as a highlight of that year, our credit rating was upgraded from sound financial management and increase. That's kind of 2021 at a high level. The audit was completed work perspective a few weeks ago. We still are working through questions from the auditors in regards to our 2021 financials, but would anticipate financial statements will be. And then our auditors will come and give a presentation to the council.
Rand, when I've heard people talk about the money that the library has, is some of that in the impact fees category?
There are impact fees that from previously were identified as library. However, our impact fee collections now are just considered at the discretion of the council as to how those impact fees would be used. Are currently otherwise everything else would currently as municipal.
It was my understanding that the library had over $1 million set aside, but I see here on this restricted investments, it says library 601,437. So I'm wondering where
there's
is?
Also a library trust fund line a little bit farther down on that as well. Those $2 amounts.
Okay, so it's less than $1 million. It's not over $1 million. At one time, somebody suggested to me that it was a ways over $1 million, but it's actually less than $1 million.
Then there's also the impact fees, which is just listed as a line item.
Okay, so
We
roughly.
can split that out farther.
Well, I'm
too,
just,
so that
if
gives
we're saying that the library has set aside and it's super important as we go forward with this project, how much money do they have? It'd just be good to know what that is.
I believe that the impact fee is on the line.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions?
Is there limitations on those impact fees, what can be spent for the library project? Or they have to be, there's got to be restrictions on what impact fees coming in for the library, if they're spendable on anything?
They aren't spendable on anything, but typically on a building project, the engineering design and the actual construction of the building.
Yep.
Eligible expenses.
And we'll need to do all that if we have a new building. Okay.
Impact fees can also only be spent based on your last study that addresses and analyzes growth. Impact fees are to support growth and infrastructure in the community.
Yep. They cause the impact.
All right, thank you very much. Item 11, communications and miscellaneous. Oh, here to the microphone so everybody at home can hear you. Welcome.
And you stayed awake the whole thing.
And just by 2 minutes, you missed out the public comments, so.
Yeah,
he
we
has to
could've
stay
got
till
through
the
his
end.
public
I feel bad,
comments.
but thanks, Dan.
Yeah, is this on?
Yep.
So I'm Dan Fitzgerald. I'm from New Richmond. I have a business in New Richmond, Fitzgerald Lawn Care. We're 1 block west of Walmart. We have a building down there. So I guess I'm here kind of playing 2 hats. Number 1 as a business owner in New Richmond. Number 2 is a property owner in New Richmond. I guess, looking into what we decided with the dump, a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of concerns with residents, us as a lawn care company. Just wanted to try to see if we can get anything cleared up. I think we're personally setting Sylvester up kind of for disaster, personally. He might argue with that, but I just feel that We're giving people stickers to use the dump. Lawn care companies cannot use the dump, which is fine. I don't expect Steve to take our waste, Steve Sylvester Custom Grinding, to take our waste, and we'll deal with that on, his side, whether we pay his fees or dump somewhere else or whatever the case may be. So I guess I'm here just to get a better understanding on, I guess, how we can do this better besides people getting stickers, just looking for some input on what could be different.
But Dan, I'm curious to ask you, you said you don't have to, or you don't dump out there?
We currently dump, we did dump at the city dump.
Yep. We'll call it the compost site, but
Compost site.
anyhow.
Yep.
But you did.
Did
But you're not intending to going forward?
We haven't made that decision yet. It's a fee to us now.
Have they given you an idea of what that fee is going to be?
Yeah.
Is it a flat fee you pay for the year?
Yep.
Okay. For the sake of saying, does it put you at a competitive disadvantage? The cost? I mean, it was free before.
It was free before we intended the dump there. I guess when everything was going through, I guess there was a lot of misunderstanding on, we charge for this service on a utility bill. I don't have a utility bill in front of me.
It's
but
50 cents.
It's like $6 a resident.
Oh, the rest of that money's for recycling. It's recycling and compost is what that is, but you can speak to that.
I mean, we can line item it any way, but at the end of the day, how much does a dump cost? How much is curbside pickup? I mean, I guess there's a lot of ways to slice a tomato.
Yeah, so we have 50 cents a month, so $6 a year per utility customer. So it's shown as it's somewhat misleading, I think, the way that it's on the utility bill, because people think it's all going to the compost site, but it's also the curbside pickup, so spring, fall, and then the Christmas tree pickup as well.
Right.
So most recently, we're spending about 25 grand a year for whether it be Sylvester or another contractor to grind up the material that was taken out there. And that wasn't even all of every year the amount has been increased, so probably this year probably would have been another 35,000. So even with Sylvester having their operation up there, they would be grinding the city curbside pickup for free of charge. So the intent would be to actually reduce the compost fee that's currently on the utility homeowner on their monthly bill. So it may be 50 cents a month now, but it may go down to 25 cents or 30 cents a month.
So do we really know how much curbside costs us to pick up for the month? You take two guys, truck, $4,000?
We do. I don't know that number off the top of my head, but we do put that together of how many.
Right, so
how many hours we
I
put
think we're
together.
taking a lot of numbers and just reaching for them, and we don't have like static numbers on, okay, it's 4 weeks. I just think there's a lot of unknowns on, curbside pickup, okay? So you still offer curbside pickup to Fitzgerald Lawn Care?
We do curbside pickup for residential customers. So we'll do spring, fall, and then Christmas trees in the
So
winter.
it's not for commercial customers?
Residential only, yep.
I guess nowhere does it say curbside pickups only for residential?
Yeah, so any communications we've found it's always been residential customers only. And that's what the compost site, it also was just residential customers only. Now, we've never been really enforcing or policing that up there, but the intent was that it was for the residential customers.
So does anybody have any suggestions on how it should run?
So it's not on the agenda, so we can't get into a discussion of it.
Okay.
I mean, you can talk with the administrator all you want.
Right, no,
I do think it would be a great idea. And Dan, I appreciate you being here tonight. I think we have to have more conversation about this. And I don't know if,
Debate, otherwise
Right, but I don't know if you're willing, as an example, to sit down, if we can get some folks together here at City Hall, because there's a number of what I think are issues have been recently identified. And I think that it's hard that what we had before wasn't working financially. And what we have right now, there's just what seems to me, there's more challenges than I anticipated would be part of this. I think it's frustrating. Do you know the Sylvester folks?
Yeah, I do, and they'll do a great job.
No, I got that, but I feel bad for them because I think there's been some negative chatter, and it comes from folks who don't live in the city. And I'm not talking about commercial haulers, right, or people that are in business, but folks that have lived in the township that have had the ability to use the compost site without paying for it, and feeling the tightness of the restriction that they can't go there anymore. So, and there's a real strong timeliness to this. And I just think, kind of based on the issues that are raised, we definitely need to sit down and put some heads together and come up with whatever the right plan is. From what I understand, Sylvester's nervous about what might happen.
Well, he's got a lot of money already invested in the site.
Right.
I understand where he's coming from. I do understand, I don't live out there, but if you're in blocks or say a half mile west of the dump with a contaminated well, you can't dump there for free.
Oh, they get city water. If they live in an area where
but
that's
they had to
impacted,
deal
but they're
with
getting
that.
city water.
They had to deal with that for that many years. Now they're gonna come there on a Saturday.
Yep.
So
$6.
this is getting more into the debate and discussion. It's not on the agenda, so
No,
it'd be in violation of open meeting laws.
For sure.
Yep, we can refer this to Public Works, and they can bring it up with staff and maybe work something out, but we can't have the discussion here. The violation of open meeting laws. Any other communications?
I have a couple things, Mayor, if I may.
But thank you for attending and bringing the issue up.
Didn't know your information.
Chief.
Yeah,
No, thanks, Dan.
Just as a reminder to everybody, this is National Public Safety Communications Week for our dispatchers. We don't have any of our own in the city, but police, fire, and EMS for the city of New Richmond all use St. Croix County Dispatch. So if you know any of them, reach out to them this week. They do a fantastic job. They're often the first calm voice that people in crisis hear, and they're often heard, but not very often seen. So if you think about it or know any of them, please give them a call this week. And then also the 4th annual Canine Fun Run/Walk will be coming up May 21st at 10 a.m. The theme this year is Twinsies. Dress up like your pet and come on down and walk the course in Richmond. Starts at the PD 10 a.m. on May 21st.
Going to say, are lambs allowed?
Boy.
As long as there's no skirt.
That says I can't answer that.
No cabbage.
So I just quickly wanted to thank the residents that voted for me as well. I very much appreciate the trust and support that you have put in me, so thank you. Although I ran unopposed, I know it's not super exciting, but 187 of you voted, so I feel like that's pretty important. I'm sure you were here for another race and, just checked my name, but I do very much appreciate it, so thank you so much for your support.
Have someone to introduce, so Lexi Friday, and she's joining us as financial analyst.
Welcome. All right, any other communications? All right, so item 12 is closed session per Wisconsin statute 19.851E, Richmond Firefighters, Inc. I am going to be recusing myself because I have some dollars involved in that. So after the vote, I will be recusing myself.
Better get some.
So is there, what
After
is
the vote, you mean after we?
I'd make a motion to go into
Yeah,
closed
'cause we're
session.
doing closed session, take a break. So there's a motion and a second to go in closed session. Call the roll.
Alderman Vries,
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Montello,
Yes.
Alderman Volker,
Yes.
Alderman Kraft,
Yes.
Alderman Kittle.
Yes.
That motion passes. I'll pass all of
This conference is no longer being recorded.
Yep.
Mike.